Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and today I want to do another response video to Lore Reloaded, who made a response video about my response video, about his video about Major Grin, and so now I have to do another response video to his response, and I know this might drive some people nuts, and so I won't play any clips from his video, because then maybe he will play that again, and then this will be like an Inception effect, of us talking about each other, and maybe it would have been easier to simply do a straight up debate. But as I explained several times, I won't do live streams simply because my English isn't good enough, and I'm not talking about my accent, I'm talking about the fact that I have to edit myself a lot. What you hear in my videos is me after a lot of editing, because a lot of times I say things with mistakes and then I have to correct it. I repeat myself a lot and then I pick what came out better, and so what you hear in my final videos is me after a lot of editing, and it won't sound as good in a live stream. And that's why I won't do live streams and live debates in the near future until my English gets better. I am getting there. Eventually I will be able to do that, but not yet. And also there's the time zone difference. Lore actually invited me when he started his response. He invited me, but that was 2 in the morning for me, and so obviously I wouldn't stay up all night to do that. And in general, I don't really like live streaming in general. I much prefer the shorter condensed videos with the main points, and I don't enjoy long videos by other people. I simply don't have the time to listen to them, even though live streams do often have all kinds of unplanned events which make it more entertaining. In the case of Lore, he has his cat who looks kind of like a Spot from TNG, and he has his kids and stuff, and so sometimes there's some kind of unplanned stuff in the background which is funny. But I think he can simply record all his videos and then edit them, and if something like that, something funny happens in the background, he can simply include it. I personally don't enjoy listening to live streams which are hours long, and so I don't think I'll ever do that unless my English really improves remarkably and I'm able to be very eloquent without any mistakes, any pauses, and I can do it live. That will be great. That will save me a lot of time, because actually editing my videos, my own videos, it takes me a long time, because, let's say I want to make a short video about something, but my actual recording is 5 times longer than what you hear in the final version, and then I have to listen to it, I have to edit it, I have to add pictures, so it sometimes takes me 2 hours to make a video which will be 10 minutes long in the end. So it's very time consuming, and if I could do it live and just record the video right away and upload it right away without listening, that will save me a lot of time and I'll be able to produce a lot more content. So I'm hoping to get there one day, but I'm not there yet. So that's why I won't do live streams, and also I prefer to think about what I'm going to say. Like, if we had a live debate, we probably are going to argue over each other, and we're probably going to get pissed off at each other. And his response, he kind of got angry in some places, and he said he's just being passionate, and I'm also like that. Like, if we get a debate about something that I find interesting, I'll also get very passionate, and I might want to have the last word or finish the sentence I wanted to say, and if someone interrupts me, I might get angry. And so if we do kind of live debates, we're probably going to get into a lot of problems, and so I think a better form of debate is just making a response video. So just say everything you want to say without interruptions, and then I can say whatever I want to say without interruptions, and this way I think it will be much more civilized. And also I prefer to do edited videos, because this way I can also think about what I'm going to say before saying it, and if I say something which later when I listen to it I disagree with myself, I can edit it out, and so it condenses my points much better and removes any pointless or stupid stuff and really purifies my arguments. So that's why I prefer to do videos like this for now. And the whole thing started when he made a complaint video, kind of a parody video of a Major Grin video, which he got annoyed by, because he claims that some of the Major Grin videos are deceptive. He says that I'm taking clips out of context in order to promote hatred for the new Star Trek shows, and as I try to explain, most of the videos on Major Grin are comedy videos, parody videos, and not supposed to be taken too seriously. And especially, those TNG edits, in which obviously I was taking everything out of context and I was twisting it to make it look like an upside down version of Star Trek, with Picard being evil, with the Federation being like an empire, and everything is dystopian. And so that was obviously deliberate, and I think it was obvious enough that anyone watching would get that it's not the real show. But I also always said that those videos are designed for people who saw the real Star Trek already. It's not designed for someone who didn't, because then he'd get the absolute upside down picture of what Star Trek is about. Now, more recently I started doing all these compilations and all these comparison videos, and some of that, the way I'm editing the clips, back to back is also designed to be funny, not just a comparison. And so it's not always totally serious. It's not always, it is basically cherry picking very specific moments from each show to compare with each other, and it's not always the same exact situation, so it's not a perfect comparison video. And he complained about that. That was one of the points in which he really got angry in his review of the Major Grin videos. And he said, you're being deceptive, and you know you are. It's not the same situation. Yeah, it's not exactly the same situation, but still the point, I think the main point of that video that he complained about was still correct. It was about, whether or not an officer should be more loyal to his friends or to Starfleet, to the truth and to the authorities and all of that. And so basically I compared the clips from the episode First Duty in TNG, in which the moral of the story in the end was that he should have told the truth, even if it meant betraying some of his friends, because his friends did something immoral. And that, I think, was the main reason why eventually the correct choice was to basically betray his friends, because they were putting blame on another friend of them who died, and he didn't agree with that. And so there were a lot of things, and that's one of the reasons which made that episode interesting, because it wasn't black and white. We can see both sides of that argument, because on the one hand, loyalty to friends is also important, and loyalty to the authorities or to your superiors is not always, in some situations that would actually be the immoral thing to do. If your commanding officer is actually the villain, for example, or if Starfleet itself or your ship is doing something immoral and you want to oppose that, maybe disobeying orders is actually the right thing to do in that situation. And we had plenty of episodes dealing with those kind of situations as well. So obviously it wasn't a black and white situation, and I'm not saying it was. And I compared those clips with clips from Lower Decks, in which Ensign Purple Hair didn't want to tell the truth about the Michael Tilly character who was doing something against regulations, and he didn't tell the captain who asked him, and so he lied to the captain to defend his friend. And Laura's argument was that the captain was actually the villain in that situation, and so that can explain it. Yeah, we can debate it, and I'm all for having this debate. But still, one of my complaints against the modern Star Trek shows is that nowadays it's always anti-authoritarian. It's always about disobeying orders and being a rebel all the time. And in the older Star Trek show, that was reserved to situations in which that was the real morality choice of the situation. Starfleet or the Federation or your captain or whoever is doing something immoral and you rebel against that, that's fine. You have to think about the situation and not just blindly follow orders. That's also something Picard said in one episode. And so Star Trek always had those kinds of situations, but in the new Star Trek show, it's been done in an illogical way, like for no reason. Just for no reason, the captain is a villain, and you have to disobey the orders just because. There's no real proper reasoning for it, no logic to it, and suddenly the Prime Directive is considered evil, and so she's doing something. She wants to give technology to that planet against regulations because it will help the planet, but in TNG they always said you shouldn't give technology to primitive people. And again, it's a debate we can have. It's an interesting debate and not a black and white one. But basically I made that comparison video to just show the differences. I wasn't really taking sides. Like, I was just showing how this show deals with that, how this show deals with that. And when I heard Lore complaining about that specific point, right before I went back to bed, I uploaded another version of that video, which also had some behind the scene footage of how they wrote the episode The First Duty. And turns out the writers were actually arguing about all these points themselves. They were actually taking different sides, and they put it into the dialogue of the episode. And that's what I think that made the episode interesting, because it wasn't really black and white. There was an interesting conflict, and you can understand both sides of it. And also that's what made the Star Trek shows in the past so good, because it wasn't black and white. And yet in the new shows, everything is black and white, and it's just more stupid overall. So that's my biggest problem in the new Star Trek shows, that things just don't make sense. Continuity is a mess. Even the internal continuity of each show and the morality tale often doesn't make any sense, and it's not a good role model, it's not a good message for kids. And so that's some of my problems in the new Star Trek shows. And so a lot of my videos are designed to kind of show all these points. And so obviously I'm taking specific moments from the show, and I cannot show the full episode, so obviously I'm taking things out of context to show something specific. I cannot show the full scenes, otherwise those videos will get blocked. I'm trying to keep it short also for safety on YouTube. But, I'm not blocking anyone's comments, I'm not deleting comments. Anyone can have the debate about the issues, so I'm not forcing anyone to accept this opinion or that opinion. I'm all for having a debate about all of these issues. And so those videos simply show the exhibits. They simply show, okay, here we have the scene from TNG, now we have a scene of a similar kind of situation, something similar from the new Star Trek shows, and I compare the two, and then we can have a debate about it. So I'm not forcing anyone to hate the new shows simply by showing clips of the new shows. Like, how does that make sense? You claim it's out of context. I don't think it was. I think, for example, you complain I showed that rapist entity from TNG, and then I showed that energy entity from Lower Decks, and showed that it also tried to penetrate into people, and so I just showed similar scenes. And he says, no, it's out of context because you cut out something that was also there in the middle. Yeah, because I only wanted to show the part in which it tries to enter someone's body, so I cut out the part in which Michael Tilly is trying to capture it somehow. I guess she has magic powers and she can handle energy entities with her bare hands somehow, and so I cut out that part because it wasn't relevant to my argument. So how is that out of context? And again, I have to edit it so that it won't get struck down. If I show whole scenes, whole episodes, obviously it will not stay on YouTube. So I only show the specific moments I need to show to make the comparison video. And that video didn't even have any real point. It was just kind of a visual comparison. This is the entity from TNG, and this is the entity from Lower Decks, and that's it. So what's the big deal about that video? So I really don't understand why you got so angry about that. Now, I did acknowledge that some of the videos I make on the channel are parody videos, comedy videos, and some people might misunderstand something. They don't understand that it's a parody or it's edited. And you know what? From now on, in any such video, which I think is unclear to some people, I will simply put it in the beginning of the video that this is a parody video, this is an edited video, or out of context. I will put it in the beginning so that no one can complain that he misunderstood something, that I'm being deceptive in what I'm showing. So I will make it clear in the beginning of a video if it has anything out of context. Unless it's really obvious. If something is obviously edited and obviously a joke, then there's no point to write it. And sometimes I didn't like doing that because sometimes the whole joke is the surprise. To make something funny, you have to surprise a person. So he would expect one thing and then get something else. And so if I reveal right from the start that this will be an edited version of it, then maybe it will take away from the joke. And so maybe in those cases I won't. Like, for example, I show a scene which seems to be like a normal scene, and then I change something, and then that will be a surprise, and that will make it funny. But if I ruin the surprise from the beginning, it won't be funny. So you can call it deceptive, but I'm going to make up my own mind on when to put the warning. If something I think might confuse people, that they won't get the joke, they'll think it's a real scene from the show, then I'll put it in the beginning of the video to make it clear, because I don't want to be deceptive. And also Laura kind of accused me indirectly of causing hatred toward the new Star Trek show, or toward people, toward fans of the show. Obviously I never did that. I guess I did make a lot of kind of hostile edits toward Alex Kurtzman, putting his face on all kinds of scenes from other movies. Now, again, this was obviously edited. Like, anyone can see this is a photoshopped face of Alex Kurtzman into some other scene, so there is no point in me to explain that this is not a real scene with Alex Kurtzman, and so this is an obvious joke. And so I think most people won't understand that it's simply comedic, and I don't wish any physical harm to him and stuff like that. And I would never do that to a fellow YouTuber. And also I never called anyone to hate the new Star Trek show. I'm simply showing all kinds of things that annoyed me in Star Trek, and I make a funny video out of it. If someone chooses not to watch Star Trek because of that, that's his choice. And if someone decides to attack another YouTuber because of that, because I showed a clip of something that annoyed me in Star Trek, and then someone gets annoyed at the new Star Trek because of that clip, that makes me responsible if that person then goes and insults some other YouTuber who defends the show. Like, how can you blame it on me? And he said that I'm not to blame, but he kind of still implies, he gets angry at those videos because of that. He says that he was under attack in all kinds of forums because he defends the new Star Trek shows. Well, when you're on YouTube, you're always going to be attacked. Like, someone is always going to get angry at you because of disagreeing with you. There's a lot of crazy people out there. There's a lot of people, I kind of choose, I have a thick skin, mostly because I'm anonymous, and that's one of the reasons I want to keep myself anonymous. I just don't show my face, my name. No one can harass me in real life, so I don't care what anyone thinks. So I can this way I can say whatever I want to say without worrying what other people will think. And so once you go on YouTube, you have to face the reality that you might have enemies and all of that. So you cannot blame it on me for showing clips of Star Trek, and then people get annoyed at the new Star Trek, and then they go after the defenders of that show. So if I see some direct threat, or if I see someone insulting you in my comment section on a personal level, then I will delete it. I will not allow it. But other than that, I can't control what other people do. And I want to avoid making certain videos because it might insult someone, or it might make someone angry about the new Star Trek. You should blame the new Star Trek. If showing a clip from the new Star Trek gets people pissed off, then you should blame the new Star Trek show and not me for showing the clip. So that's what I can say about that. So that's really all I have to say about the Major Grin videos. But you know, I will take something he said into mind in future videos, and that is to not be deceptive, not to fool people. If it's not for a joke, if it's not an obvious joke, then I will make it clear in either the comments or in the title or in the beginning of the video, so that no one can say I'm being deceptive. And so I will take something he said to my attention. Then later he started responding about some of my points about his videos, because I was complaining that I simply said I disagree with some of the claims he made about the older Star Trek shows, because he was basically attacking specific characters for various actions they did, and he kind of exaggerated it in my opinion. I'm not saying he was totally wrong. I do think a lot of his claims are correct about various characters being shady, doing shady things, but he kind of exaggerated it, and so I was defending that, and then he defended his claim. And the reason he brought up all those nasty things from the older Star Trek shows is in response to the Major Grin videos, in which I'm showing everything wrong in the new Star Trek shows, and so that's why he mentions all the bad things about the older Star Trek shows, to kind of say the old one was bad as well. But I never said there were never any bad things in the older Star Trek shows. I often poked fun at a lot of stuff in the old shows, but I do think the new shows are worse. Like the stuff we saw in the Picard show, for example, in which they take a character from Voyager and literally torture and destroy him in such a way that was never done before in the Star Trek franchise. Of course, there were people brutally murdered, like Commander Remick, whose head blew up and all of that, but he was not a beloved character. And yet the new shows are taking characters we love and destroying them. What they did with Hugh, what they did with Picard himself, the way they kind of humiliate him throughout the show with no justification. If it was written better, if there was real reason for that whole character arc, I'd be fine with that, but there wasn't. Picard was being blamed for things that are not his fault and apologizing and getting humiliated. And so the way it was done, the execution was much worse in the new Star Trek show, in my opinion. And the whole spirit of it, the whole nastiness, the whole dystopia versus utopia, I made a lot of videos about that. The vision of Gene Roddenberry, I don't think anyone can deny that they basically dismiss all of those ideas, or do them in a very stupid way, like, you know, that school fight in the short track, Children of Mars, the way it was shown, like exactly like today. There's no different, nothing futuristic about that at all, nothing enlightened about that at all. It was like today and even worse than today. And so where is the vision of Gene Roddenberry in these new shows? It's not there at all. They totally abandon all the ideas, like greed, poverty on Earth, like Raffi living in a trailer and complaining about Picard having a big house. All that stuff is totally, it's so unfitting to the old vision that I just laugh at that. It's funny to me. So I make videos pointing out all those things, not just to complain about them, but because I do find it funny, and a lot of people really find it, I guess some people find it sad, people who really cared about the old Star Trek shows, they do find it sad, but also kind of funny at the same time. So I don't think my complaints about those issues are out of context. I don't think it's being deceptive. I'm simply showing back to back things from the old Star Trek shows versus the new Star Trek show. I never said there were no instances of bad behavior in the old Star Trek shows, but it wasn't as bad. That's my point. So anyway, Lore brought up a few issues which he talked about in the past, complaining about the old Star Trek shows, very specific events in specific episodes which were immoral, and I agree a lot of them are immoral, but Lore kind of tends to exaggerate them also, like, you know, that time Cisco poisoned the whole planet. He talked about that in multiple videos, making Cisco to be like the worst war criminal and all of that. But when you look at the actual episode, there was no mention of a single civilian who died as a result, and so I disagree that he's a war criminal. Was it immoral? Probably yes. Was it a necessary evil? Probably yes. Was it the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? It's up to the viewer to decide, and that's what's good about Deep Space Nine. It has all kinds of issues which we can debate about till this day, because it's not a black and white issue. It's a gray area. It's that area of morality which we cannot really determine what was the right thing. We have to look at the whole context. If what he did during the Dominion War actually saved the whole Federation, so maybe it was worth it to sacrifice your morality a little bit to achieve that goal, because otherwise you'll get the whole Federation conquered or destroyed or genocide. So maybe doing a small necessary evil against your enemies to prevent that was the right thing to do. So we can debate about it, and that's why Section 31 used to be interesting when it was in Deep Space Nine, because we could argue that they're doing things for the greater good, kind of a necessary evil, and so they're not totally evil villains. And yet in the new Star Trek shows, they're doing it in a stupid way which is not interesting to debate. There's nothing to debate about. There's no real issue at stake, and so it's just there, just Section 31. Everybody knows about them. They're the intelligence arm of Starfleet, and even in the short trek, suddenly everybody knows about Section 31 as if it's Starfleet intelligence, which is not what it was in Deep Space Nine. Anyway, I'm getting off topic, so this is just one example of the shadiness of Deep Space Nine actually being interesting because it's all controversial. It's all, we can discuss about it and debate about it, and it's all in the gray area of morality. And some people, including myself, do think that in some ways Deep Space Nine is not as good as TNG, because TNG was a good role model for kids, with characters like Picard always doing the right thing. But Deep Space Nine was kind of a more realistic, because in reality doing the right thing is not always the correct thing. Sometimes you do have to get dirty, sometimes you do have to do necessary evil for the greater good. So Deep Space Nine was kind of more realistic, but less of a role model for kids, and so I have some mixed feelings on that. But anyway, the new Star Trek shows are nothing like that. They don't really deal with any morality tales that much. And when they do, it's always black and white. Oh, this is good, this is evil, and that's it. So there's no real discussion about anything. So anyway, I talked about some of the issues he brings up. He also complained about First Contact. He says that Lily was the victim of some historical injustice because no one ever talks about her. No one mentions that she was the partner of Cochrane. And she said in that movie that she helped build the ship. But I responded to that, even when he was making videos about that there was no indication that she actually invented the warp technology itself. She only helped him build the ship. And also right before the Borg attack, she actually told him that she will not go into space if he's going to be drunk, and he said he's not going to go sober. And so I think that maybe in the original timeline, before the Borg intervention, maybe she didn't even go with him into space, maybe he went alone, and that's why she never became famous, and so I see no problem with that. And yet Lore is turning all of this into, social justice warrior problem by saying that Lily was some kind of victim, that Cochrane never gave her the credit she deserved, but we have no indication that she did anything except building some of the ship. Now, I don't mind if the movie wanted to deal with the topic as Lore describes it, that maybe Lily was much more important than we thought, and maybe she didn't get the credit. If the movie wanted to show that, I'm fine with that. I wouldn't object to that idea, but it didn't. So why do you invent stuff that wasn't in the movie and then talk about it as if it's fact? I'm all for inventing theories. I do it myself. I invent all kinds of theories of stuff that happened off screen, in the background, in between episodes, to try to explain things, to invent my own stories in between. But I always say it's just my theory. I don't claim that that is the fact. And yet Lore kind of repeated that point a lot of times, and there is no actual evidence of it. He also recently made a video saying that the Borg actually staged that whole event of trying to stop First Contact. They didn't really want to stop it, they actually wanted to fulfill it because they needed Starfleet to exist so that Voyager will save them from species 8472. But I disagree with that theory as well, because that whole event happened before Voyager saved the Borg, and so how would they even know about it? And also in the movie itself, we never see any indication that the Borg are not doing their best to destroy the first warp flight. The only evidence that Lore had was that the Borg fire caused very little damage to that base where Cochrane was, and that's something I complained about as well in that movie. But I think a much simpler explanation is simply that their weapons were malfunctioning because of traveling through that vortex. We know that the Enterprise also suffered some system damage. Their shields were malfunctioning. Their torpedoes did seem to function fine, but maybe the Borg sphere had different kind of damage, and so maybe their weapons got weaker than normal, and it wasn't exactly torpedoes, it was some kind of plasma weapon, and so it caused much less damage than they wanted to. And I do think that was kind of a mistake in the movie, but literally that's the only evidence that Lore has that this was some sort of conspiracy by the Borg, and so I totally disagree with that theory, and it doesn't really fit the time frames. Like all of this, the part in the future started before Voyager met the Borg in the episode Scorpion, and so it doesn't make sense. This theory, unfortunately, doesn't make sense. If you think about it, like we saw how the Borg Queen orders Data to shoot at the Phoenix and was totally surprised when he missed. And so if that was all a plan, then why was she doing that? Or was she pretending to be surprised? And so that's why his theory just isn't logical. It doesn't make sense, in my opinion. Again, I'm saying I'm all for inventing theories to explain away mistakes in the movie, but the theory has to make sense. And I have to say, unfortunately, Lore is not always doing his research properly. Like, why not check the start date? When is the movie taking place? Was it after Scorpion or before? If you saw that it was before Scorpion, then your theory makes no sense. Why was the Borg surprised by Data's betrayal? Was she planning it the whole time? So I disagree with this theory, and this is not a personal attack against Lore. I'm simply stating my problems with the issues that he's talking about, his theories, his claims, are sometimes, not always, sometimes they are not properly researched and not backed up with enough evidence. And as for his claim that Cisco raped the mirror universe Dax, I also kind of disagreed with that, because he didn't pretend to be a totally different person. He pretended to be the Cisco from the mirror universe, and the mirror universe is technically like an alternate timeline, because we have the same exact people and only the events around them are different, and so their personality is also different, and so they are not the same people, we can argue, but they're not total stranger either. So this is kind of not exactly the same as impersonating a totally different person. He's basically impersonating himself from a different timeline. So it's not, I'm not saying it's not immoral, but it's not as immoral as pretending to be someone else completely. And I can give another example to kind of explain this. Think about the episode Parallels in TNG, in which Worf was traveling to different realities, different timelines, you can say, and in one of them Troy was married to him, and Troy wanted him, and she kissed him. And even after she knew it's not her Worf, she still kissed him again. So what if they went further? What if that Troy slept with him? Would that be considered as if she's cheating on her Worf with this other Worf? I say not exactly, because it's still Worf. It's Worf from a different timeline, a different reality, but it's still Worf. So it's not exactly the same as cheating with a total stranger. And so what Cisco did in that episode, I cannot classify that as rape exactly. Was it impolite? Yes. Was it slightly immoral? Yes. Was it a necessary evil? Yes. So I don't think it destroys the character of Cisco. It does make him much more shady and all of that. But you know, Captain Kirk also did a lot of shady stuff like that. And the best example is probably when he was on that planet which was like ancient Rome, and he was given that slave woman to sleep with him, and he agreed to do that. And so what does that make Kirk? He slept with a woman who was a slave, who was ordered to do it, and he did. And so doesn't that make him a shady character? And we have examples like that in every show. But all of those shows were still light years better than the new Star Trek shows, in my opinion, because the new ones have much more nasty stuff, and much more graphic also, like Ash Tyler and L'Oreal, and that whole scene was much nastier than anything we saw, much more visually nasty. And so if Lore was trying to defend the new show and it has even more nasty stuff, then it's not a good defense. Just saying that other show also had something wrong doesn't mean the new one has nothing wrong. So anyway, he pointed out a few episodes which had some kind of shady stuff in them, and I will add to that list something he didn't mention. Remember that time in the episode First Contact when Riker was imprisoned in a hospital, and then some woman offered him freedom if he sleeps with her. And then he had no other choice, and he did, and then she helped him escape. So was Riker raped in that episode because he was basically coerced into having sex with that woman in exchange for his freedom? So isn't that kind of the same as if, a prison guard offers to open the door for you if you sleep with him first? So isn't that kind of the same thing? And yet Riker didn't really seem to mind, and the episode played it off as a joke. So maybe a scene like that wouldn't really fly nowadays. Maybe if someone does that today, that would be considered like such a terrible message on a television show, to show that you can sleep with people to get your freedom. And this reminds me of the James Bond movies. Stuff like that happened all the time. And I'm all for having this discussion and debating all these issues. Was this moral or immoral and all of that? I don't mind talking about that, and every one of those topics that we briefly exchange our opinion about, every one of them I can do a long video about it and analyze it and to look at all the possible angles on it. But even if I agree with Lore Reloaded that every one of those instances he mentions was something very immoral, I still would say the show overall was mostly good and with good messages, even though once in a while they did have something immoral or the wrong message. And these are all issues I'm going to talk about in videos because they are interesting, and these kinds of issues is what makes Star Trek interesting to me, much more interesting than Star Wars ever was on an intellectual level. Star Wars was more entertaining maybe, but on an intellectual level Star Trek was much more interesting because it often dealt with all kinds of complicated, complex questions, either political questions or social questions and metaphysical questions. Just like I was just talking about, if there are parallel realities, would your copy in that universe be considered a different person, or would that be you? And we also talked about, the issue of twins and all of that. So all of these kinds of issues actually bring up very interesting metaphysical, philosophical questions, like what makes you you? What makes a person separate from a different person? If it's an identical twin who grew up in the same exact conditions, wouldn't he be the same exact person in every way, unless you believe in souls and there's some kind of metaphysical, supernatural soul on top? And if not, then technically it is the same person, you know, the double of Riker from the transporter malfunction. Is he the same exact person or not? Is a double from a different timeline is the same person or not? Or if someone replicates you somehow, you know, that android body of the new Picard in the Picard show, is that really Picard or not? If it's an exact copy of his brainwaves, then maybe it is Picard, but what if the old Picard didn't die and there would now be two Picards, and which of them are real? Maybe both of them are real. And so all of these issues, I think they are very interesting existential philosophical questions which don't have any exact answers, and we can debate about all of those issues, and that's why I find science fiction interesting. It's exactly those types of issues and questions it raises that I find really interesting to think about, and maybe I will do a whole bunch of videos about topics like that in the near future. We can also have a debate about it. I'm not just here to talk with myself, I always enjoy reading the comments and discussing the issues with my commentators. That's part of the fun. And so I will definitely keep doing that. And as I always say, let me know what you think in the comment section below and we can discuss it. And I will see you all next time. Bye bye.